Observe the human organism from a purely biological perspective. It is a deeply fascinating anomaly. The creature finally achieves exactly what it has been hunting for: profound happiness, absolute peace. Logically, it should signal the tribe to celebrate, but instead of sharing this victory, it executes a flawless communication blackout. It stops replying to messages. It completely vanishes into the shadows. Your friends call this ghosting. Society labels you as arrogant or utterly ungrateful. They are entirely blind to the invisible mechanics of your nervous system. You are not isolating yourself because you lack empathy. You are currently trapped in a devastating biological glitch known as a social battery leak. In this video, I will expose the shocking evolutionary truth behind your sudden disappearance. I will show you exactly why your brain treats profound joy as a massive cognitive threat, forcing an immediate quarantine protocol just to keep your neurons intact. We are going to dismantle the quiet guilt of walking away when life gets perfectly good. You have been endlessly manipulated by a toxic cultural narrative that preaches a very specific gospel of happiness. Modern psychology and wellness influencers love to aggressively push the idea that joy is only real when it is actively shared. They confidently claim that when you achieve a goal, find a peaceful relationship, or finally experience profound stability, you owe the world a celebration. You are expected to answer every text message, attend gatherings, and radiate a constant glowing energy to prove your success. You deeply believe that if you want to retreat into total isolation during your best moments, you must be harboring a dark subconscious fear of happiness or a flawed avoidant personality. Wrong. That is the most arrogant, scientifically illiterate assumption ever imposed on the human nervous system. What society casually labels as an ungrateful withdrawal, biological science brutally classifies as a critical positive load quarantine. Let me completely dismantle this dangerous social illusion for you right now. You are absolutely not afraid of your own joy. You are simply suffering from a massive invisible energy leak. Over the decades, you have been taught that dealing with trauma and grief is the only thing that exhausts the brain. But here's the terrifying truth that your extroverted society refuses to acknowledge. Processing extreme positive emotion requires a terrifyingly large expenditure of metabolic fuel. True, profound peace is not a lightweight file for your brain to download. It is a massive, incredibly complex software update that requires your entire cognitive bandwidth to successfully install. When you reach a state of genuine happiness, your brain becomes heavily flooded with serotonin and oxytocin. This chemical bath feels wonderful, but it physically consumes almost all of your available neurological resources. There's literally no power left in your social battery. So, what does a highly efficient biological machine do when its main power grid is entirely focused on internal processing? It actively shuts down all non-essential external applications. You unintentionally ignore your best friends. You leave messages unread for days. You cancel weekend plans to just sit alone in a quiet room. You do not do this because you're an arrogant, disconnected friend. You do this because performing happiness for an audience is an excruciatingly heavy cognitive labor. Smiling, explaining your success, and managing the emotional reactions of other people requires an intense level of social calculation that your saturated brain simply cannot afford right now. The heavy guilt you feel for disappearing is completely manufactured. Your conscious mind thinks you're being rude, but your autonomic nervous system is actively executing a flawless survival protocol. You have successfully duped yourself into believing you're broken for needing isolation. The experts told you to lean into your community, but forcing a saturated brain to socialize is exactly like plugging a dozen high-voltage appliances into a single overheating wall outlet. You do not need to push yourself to reply to those messages. You are fighting a ruthless physical limitation of your own cognitive bandwidth that positive thinking cannot override. We must immediately drop these useless social obligations. The isolation you crave is not a quirky antisocial habit. It is a tangible biological necessity wired directly into the physical tissue of your brain. The societal advice officially ends here. Now, we must forcefully enter the microscopic laboratory of your own anatomy to witness the shocking neurological blackout happening right now. Forget your social obligations. Erase your extroverted guilt. We are plunging directly into the metabolic economy of your cerebral cortex. Look at the neurochemical distribution. Millisecond zero. You achieve a profound state of peace or a major personal victory. A massive, beautiful wave of serotonin and oxytocin floods the synapses. It is a physiological masterpiece. But happiness is absolutely not biologically free. Millisecond 12. Processing this intense positive state requires massive amounts of glucose and cellular energy. Your brain is actively rewriting its baseline of safety, constructing new neural pathways to sustain this newfound stability. The energy grid is stretched to its absolute maximum capacity. Millisecond 50. A text message arrives. A friend wants to celebrate with you. To simply answer that message, your brain must suddenly activate the social cognition network. It must retrieve vocabulary, anticipate their emotional response, and format a highly expressive reply. The autonomic nervous system rapidly calculates this extra metabolic cost. It realizes there is zero available voltage left. By second 2, the system violently pulls the plug on your external communication ports. The language centers are placed in an enforced standby mode. Your thumbs refuse to type. The desire to interact drops to absolute zero. A profound, heavy silence wraps around your mind. Society casually calls this ghosting science, calls it a positive load quarantine. Your nervous system is not broken. It is executing a flawless, desperate, power-saving protocol. The biological machine is simply protecting its internal joy from external interference. The social battery is not a cute metaphor. It is a literal measure of available neuroelectric energy, and yours is currently leaking entirely into the monumental task of digesting your own happiness. To prevent a complete systemic crash, your brain actively paralyzes your social output. That profound, agonizing inability to simply text back a smiley face is nothing but a mechanical biological firewall. It is actively sealing off the risk of energy depletion. You cannot outthink this. You cannot negotiate with a saturated neural pathway. You cannot override the brutal laws of metabolic conservation with mere politeness. Look at this scan. The internal processing centers are glowing a vibrant, heavy gold, while the social engagement circuits are completely dark. Your biology is operating perfectly. It is executing the exact quarantine sequence it was meticulously designed to run. You are entirely innocent of this mechanical withdrawal. But this aggressive defensive mechanism did not just randomly materialize out of thin air. The ancient software running this social blackout was absolutely not written for a world of instant messaging and constant digital access. To understand why your cellular structure equates shared happiness with an unbearable metabolic threat, we have to immediately leave this room. We must aggressively pull the camera back, rip through the glowing screens of your smartphone, and stare directly into the cold, unforgiving darkness of our primitive tribal survival. Let us completely shatter the microscopic lens, ripping the camera out of your saturated cerebral cortex, tearing through the glowing networks of modern communication, and aggressively rewinding the evolutionary clock by 200,000 years. Welcome to the brutal, scarce reality of the Pleistocene epoch. Here, the ancient human brain was meticulously engineered to survive constant starvation, disease, and lethal predators. It became an absolute master of managing misery and trauma. But watch carefully what happens when a tribal hunter gathers an unprecedented, massive bounty. When a rare moment of absolute safety and abundant joy randomly occurs, the entire tribe immediately swarms. The successful individual is instantly forced to distribute the valuable resources, navigate the sudden social hierarchy shift, and absorb the overwhelming emotional expectations of 50 other demanding humans. In the ancient world, personal success instantly triggered a terrifying social tax. To protect its finite energy, the nervous system evolved a harsh preventative protocol. It learned to immediately hide the bounty. It fundamentally learned that radiating happiness makes you a prime target for intense communal extraction. This secretive Energy-saving quarantine is the majestic, deeply ingrained social rhythm etched permanently into the core of your DNA. Now, violently snap the pendulum back to the present moment. Look at the agonizing psychological reality of your daily existence. You are a primal survivor sitting completely safe in a climate-controlled room, finally experiencing a moment of profound personal joy, being violently forced to broadcast it to an infinite digital tribe. The mismatch is an absolute evolutionary catastrophe. Modern civilization, with its toxic culture of continuous performance and endless digital validation, demands that you instantly convert your private peace into public entertainment. Corporate social media platforms are the ultimate goals of human connectivity, completely ignoring the rigid metabolic limits of a nervous system that literally views shared joy as a massive threat of energy depletion. You are a secretive hunter-gatherer violently forced into a lifestyle of unbearable social inflation. Your brain is desperately screaming for a sterile room to quietly digest its own chemical triumph, but all it gets is a buzzing smartphone, demanding immediate emotional labor from hundreds of casual acquaintances. How could you possibly adapt to this cultural nightmare? You deeply believe you're a terrible, selfish friend for wanting to completely disappear from society, but you are bringing a primitive fear of the social tax to a hostile, hyper-connected cage of modern convenience. You're not fighting your own arrogance. You're fighting the crushing structural design of the 21st century that has rendered your private joy utterly unacceptable to the collective. The heavy guilt you feel when you ghost your contacts during a happy moment is not a sign of moral decay. It is the brilliant, desperate rebellion of a primal organism trying to artificially simulate the safe, isolated cave it was violently robbed of. You are completely innocent of this mechanical withdrawal. The overwhelming urge to vanish every single time you succeed is not a personal weakness. It is the majestic, tragic crash of an ancient biological operating system buckling under the crushing, suffocating weight of an extroverted era it fundamentally cannot comprehend. You are carrying the heavy, unspoken burden of an entire lineage of survivors forced to live as public performers without a single moment of authentic, unshared peace. But now, let the grand historical timeline slowly dissolve. Stop the ticking of the evolutionary clock. Silence the deafening roar of the digital tribe. Let the camera fall back down from the cold cosmos, descending quietly through the ceiling, returning to the absolute physical stillness of your room. The history of tribal dynamics has finally finished its defense. The evolutionary data has delivered its unshakable verdict. The science simply no longer matters in this quiet space. The crushing weight of the extroverted tribe slowly fades away. Listen to the absolute stillness of your own room. Notice the faint dust particles dancing in the quiet light. Feel the gentle, rhythmic rise and fall of your chest as your lungs expand and collapse. You do not need to analyze your social battery or track your oxytocin levels anymore. You do not need to understand the vast, invisible evolutionary taxation systems that govern the extroverted demands of the modern world. All of that immense, crushing cultural noise ends right here at the physical edge of your own sanctuary. For years, you have violently forced yourself to perform your own joy for an invisible audience. You deeply believe that constantly reporting your successes, endlessly replying to congratulatory messages, and maintaining a glowing outward persona was the ultimate mark of a grateful, healthy human being. You sincerely thought your sudden, overwhelming desire to completely vanish during your happiest moments was a shameful sign that you were fundamentally broken or arrogant. Let that incredibly heavy, rusted armor of social performance fall to the floor right now. You are not a mechanical broadcasting tower built to instantly transmit your internal peace to the outside world. You're just a fragile, beautiful biological organism that desperately needs the permission to quietly digest its own triumph in the dark. The relentless pursuit of shared happiness is nothing but a cruel neurological illusion. You have the undeniable existential right to be completely unreachable in this delicate moment of peace. The quarantine protocol is precisely this. It is the brave act of sitting in total silence, turning off your phone, and formally submitting your resignation letter from the exhausting role of the public entertainer. In this quiet, sterile room, you are not betraying your friends, you're not pushing love away, you're simply allowing your saturated nervous system to absorb the profound shock of absolute stability. You are actively giving your brain the freedom it was violently robbed of by modern social media standards. By quietly reclaiming this tiny fraction of isolation, you're not being selfish. You are actively performing the most profound act of human preservation against a massive system meticulously designed to consume your authentic joy. You are bravely choosing to let your own consciousness rest in a state of native clarity, bathed in the quiet dignity of owing absolutely no one an explanation for your absence. Your innate intelligence, your deep emotional energy, and your inner peace are permanently restored, not by adding more complicated social interactions, but by deeply honoring the profound healing emptiness of your own private victory. The biology has finally spoken, and the clear path to your existential liberation has been laid out in the quiet darkness of your room. The heavy, invisible prison door of extroverted expectation is already standing wide open. The only remaining question is what you will quietly choose to do when the shadows fade and the world inevitably demands your attention again. Tomorrow, when you experience a moment of profound personal joy, will you surrender your fragile mind back to the crushing weight of the social tax? Or will you fiercely protect the quiet sanctuary of your own beautifully isolated happiness? You have successfully executed the quarantine protocol. The social battery leak is officially sealed. You are now free to digest your profound joy in the beautiful, undisturbed isolation of your own mind. But do not let this fragile new peace deceive your biological logic. The silence protects you when you are happy. Yet a much darker, far more terrifying psychological threat is waiting in the background. What happens when the emotion violently flooding your neural pathways is not a pristine victory, but a massive, paralyzing wave of anxiety and despair? In those devastating moments, closing the door and isolating yourself will not save your nervous system. It will completely bury you alive. You are standing at a profoundly critical crossroads right now. Will you bravely vanish into the shadows to protect your fragile happiness today, or will you silently allow society to force you back onto the exhausting, extroverted stage tomorrow? Leave your exact choice in the comments below. Write your definitive decision down to make it a binding physical contract with your own recovering mind. You have survived the toxic social tax of modern joy. But the shocking biological reality of your brain's hidden escape hatch and the precise mechanical hack to trigger a secret neurological state known as God mode to terminate any negative emotional spiral in seconds will be completely dismantled for you in the next video.